Council's meeting this evening. It's number 4492 and it's the 15th of February 2021. I'd like to start the proceedings by an acknowledgement of country. I would like to show my respects and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land of elders past, present and emerging on which this meeting takes place.
We thank you, Lord, for the honour of being called by our fellow citizens to this office of honour and trust. Give us grace diligently and honourably, free from private interest or prejudice, to discharge the duties entrusted to us to the common good and as in your sight, through Jesus Christ our Lord.
Amen. Okay, attendance. We have all councillors. Councillor Collins, is he joining us? He's now coming into the meeting. Apologies, there's none. Welcome, Councillor Collins. We've just started the meeting, so we're just up to declarations of interest. Yes, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would declare an interest in item number 4.19, in as much as the parking restrictions outside the Baronia Park public school are opposite my partner's place of business.
Thank
you.
So
it's pecuniary, but not significant.
Okay. Are there any other declarations of interest for this evening's paper? Being none, we now move to confirmation of the minutes. Before we do that, I'd just make council aware there's some minor formatting issues that need to be tidied up, fonting and a couple of rogue elements in the paper, so that'll be done. But would somebody like to move the minutes? Councillor McLaughlin, is there a seconder to that? Councillor Sanderson, any discussion? Put the minutes, all those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. We now move to the first matter on the business paper, and I do note that we have a number of speakers this evening, so I will ask council, can we move some items forward? But before we do that, I'll do the mayoral minute 2.1 on page 1. The purpose of this mayoral minute is to acknowledge the outstanding service to our community by one of our members of our community, Mr. Tony Coote. And it's to acknowledge his contribution to the heritage conservation of Hunters Hill as the Trust representative on the Conservation Advisory Panel. And I think it's important that I read out what's in the paper here before we move a recommendation. Council was informed in December 2020 that Mr. Tony Coote resigned as the Hunters Hill Trust representative on the Conservation Advisory Panel. It has been quite some years, around 50 in fact, since Tony Coote joined the Conservation Advisory Panel. A remarkable effort and a sign of Tony's dedication to the heritage in Hunters Hill. As a long-standing representative on the Conservation Advisory Panel, his efforts also reflect his personal dedication to the preservation of the distinct historic identity of the municipality. Over his long term of service, Tony has voluntarily devoted countless hours both to the work of the panel and in maintaining vigilance over events that needed to be brought to the attention of the council. Tony's breadth and depth of knowledge of the Hunters Hill history and environment is derived from his experiences and observations as a long-term resident. His architectural know-how has been an invaluable asset to the panel's deliberations and to the applicants in suggesting practical solutions to unnecessarily complex issues. Tony's contribution to heritage conservation of Hunters Hill is valued, and his selfless service to the Hunters Hill community was also recognised by the Good Citizen Award from the Honourable Federal Member of North Sydney, Mr. Joe Hockey. I wish to acknowledge and thank Mr. Tony Coote, for his outstanding contribution over half a century of the Hunter Soil Conservation Advisory Panel. And as a personal note, when I first joined council in 1987, Tony was on the Conservation Advisory Panel, which I chaired for about 12 years. And I can testify to his knowledge and dedication. And as I've said in the minute here, he always had very, very good suggestions as to how some of the issues could be overcome. Tony has sent me a note, which is probably interesting in terms of he came to CAP via David Turner, who was the Institute of Architect representative on CAP. David was leaving the municipality and asked me if I would take over the role. So I started off as the Royal Australian Institute of Architects rep and later switched to representing the trust. So I know Tony's contribution is second to none. And I'd like to move the recommendation that the report be received and noted, that council invite Mr. Coote to a presentation in the chambers. Is there a seconder to that? The Deputy Mayor, Councillor Sanderson. I'd just also like to mention that the reason why we're not doing the presentation tonight is because it's most appropriate to do that in a face-to-face meeting, which is most likely to be in March. Is there any further discussion? Yes, Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for bringing this important mayoral minute to council. I come from the other end of the spectrum. I've served a mere 3 years on the Conservation Advisory Panel. In that time, I've come to appreciate the great work that panel does, and for someone a member of our community, a member of Hunter Soil Trust, to have served for 50 years is just an absolutely outstanding effort. And I wish Tony all the very best in whatever he does in the future. It's just an amazing effort.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
Yes, I would echo those sentiments. I worked with Tony on the Conservation Advisory Panel for a number of years as well. In fact, that's where I first met him. And I think you hit the nail on the head, Mr. Mayor, when you said his approach was always very practical and very pragmatic, and his suggestions were always, really useful solutions to some complex issues. So he brought a lot to CAP, and over 50 years, he had an enormous amount of knowledge about this community and its buildings. So that's to be applauded, and hopefully we'll have a chance to say a bit more when we see him in the chamber.
Thank you. Is there any further comments? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. And we look forward to meeting in person with Tony in the near future. So thank you, Tony, for all your contribution. We now need, because this is a fairly complex paper, and we have a number of speakers wishing to address issues on the paper, that I'd like to put to council if you would like to bring forward items 4.4, 4.6, 4.7 and 4.11 to allow people to address us. Councillor Miles and Councillor Sanderson.
Mr. Mayor, could I suggest we also bring 3.1 forward? There is a speaker for that as well.
Okay, 3.1. Okay, you happy with that, Councillor Miles? Bringing 3.1 forward? Yep, okay. Any debate? Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. We now move to 3.1. And do we have a speaker for that? We do. Okay. Could is it being read or is it? Okay.
So this is from Miss Katie Little. As a resident of High Street in the area locally known as Boronia Park, I have been extremely concerned about the traffic on my street for the 15 years I've been here. I have seen the traffic get progressively worse and more dangerous. I cannot stress enough the urgency of some serious planning by council to address our area. The problem is our small suburban neighbourhood has become a shortcut for aggressive drivers not wanting to be held up by the traffic lights at Ryde and Pittwater. So they cut through the Pittwater roundabout. High Street is supposed to be a 50km/h zone, and drivers regularly scream down at 70 km/h. I have lost count of the number of times drivers have overtaken me on the wrong side when I have slowed down to prepare to pull into my driveway. I have even had a person overtake me the wrong way around the roundabout at the corner of Park and High Street. I have had a vehicle parked on High Street completely written off, as have an alarming number of neighbours. What concerns me most of all is that many children are crossing High Street every day to get to the bus stops and to get to and from Boronia Park Public School. On a bad day, traffic can be congested from the Pittwater Road roundabout back to Earl Street, and children and grown-ups are weaving through stationary cars with drivers screaming at 70 km/h the other direction. On a rainy day, it's truly terrifying. As my son is, a child in my son's year 3 at Boronia Park was hit by a driver on Blacksland Street last week and was taken to hospital. Can the council make it an urgent priority to get the local area traffic management plan done as soon as possible? Our local suburb needs more than just a quick fix. It needs a real plan as more huge apartment blocks on Epping Road go up and our local suburb becomes more dangerous and unlivable by the day. Thank you.
Are there any other speakers?
No.
Okay. That brings us to the notice of motion brought by Councillor Crassoy. Would you wish to move your motion?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I think I have a seconder and Councillor McLaughlin on the paper.
You do, yes. Councillor McLaughlin is the seconder, yes.
May I speak to it now, Mr. Mayor?
You certainly may, yes.
Thank you. Firstly, on this motion, I would just like to thank the General Manager and Council staff for the outstanding groundwork that's been done on traffic management across the whole suburb. Over the last few years, we've had a safety audit done, asset management strategy and various iterations and plan done, parking strategy, lots of road works done. And I think Boronia Park has waited long enough for their turn to have a master plan with all of this background work in mind. I would like to thank the residents of Boronia Park who have been quietly advocating and waiting patiently on some sound traffic solutions in their area since long before I became a councillor. Certainly at the town hall meeting that I think most councillors attended in the lead up to the election when we promised that we would make that area a high priority. So it was with great delight the other day at our councillor annual strategy session, I believe it was, that we were discussing other traffic matters in Boronia Park, and this came up again, and I'm hopeful that we have the support of most of the council to get this plan up and running. So thank you.
Are there any speakers against? Speakers for?
Just a question, if I may. Sorry,
yes.
a question.
Yes.
Of the general manager. Does this? Because I know we spoke about this at the councillor weekend or end of week. Does this motion give everything we need to do? Can I just get advice, because it's quite broad, and I just want to make sure that this basically gives us what we need to actually do this on right away.
Madam General Manager, do you have any advice?
Straight through, Mr. Mayor. Yes, it does, Councillor Collins. It provides sufficient direction to the staff. Thank you.
Great. Okay, that's fine for me. Thank you.
Is there any further speakers for or against? Councillor McLaughlin.
I'll just speak very briefly for the motion, because I know that it's something Councillor Crassoy has been wanting and trying to move forward for quite some time. And it really does just address some of those more sort of individual issues that we've been dealing with. It consolidates a lot of those problems that we've been looking at around speed and traffic calming, and addresses, well, hopefully will address some of those issues regarding incidences that have happened in that precinct recently. So I know that she's wanted it for some time, and the staff are very supportive. So let's get this thing done, and it will be a great outcome for everybody.
Any further speakers? I'd just like to add that it's good that we're going to treat that whole precinct as a whole. Piecemeal solutions never solve problems, so a comprehensive look at it and a quick look at it, I think, is important. Just an observation I've made with modern technology. If you go on Google in peak hours, it routes traffic through that area rather than along wide roads. So modern technology is providing additional challenges for us as communities, and I hope that we'll be able to collectively come up with some meaningful solutions for that precinct. Yes, Councillor Crasso, you wish to reply.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, everyone. I, as expected, knew that everyone would be getting behind this and supportive. What this does for the residents is it assures them that council, we had heard their concerns before, and some of us had been advocating strongly before. There have been opportunities before to address this whole precinct with community working group, but it didn't happen. So now it's back on the agenda, and it will keep coming back to council until we have this done. It gives them the assurance that they need that other reactive projects won't leapfrog over Boronia Park anymore, and that that precinct is just as important as every other area in the suburb as far as safety goes. So congratulations to the council for making the wise choice.
That concludes debate. I now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that unanimous. Now that brings us to item 4.4, and I'll just find that in my papers. 4.3, which is dealing with the Boronia Park Sports and Community Facility progress report. There are some speakers for that. Are they in person or are they written submissions?
We have one written submission, but first of all is Alistair Sharpling.
Okay. Alistair is online?
Yes, Alistair's here.
Good on you.
Just changing
Okay.
computers.
Could you please give me, give council your address, please?
Yes. As in my address, not my geographical.
No, what you want to present to council, sorry, address.
Right.
Could mean street number, which I
Yes, yes.
don't mean, yeah.
So tonight I'm speaking as the president of Untitled Trust. And we're really disturbed at what's written in the proposal under 4.4. We object to, in particular, to several of the recommendations. The fact that the project seems to be going ahead in spite of there still being no business case. We note that there's really the table that's written about the size of the community room that's proposed there compared to the other community spaces in the suburb. It's very strange because it's based on the COVID concept, I believe, of 4 square metres per person, so that it allows only 75 people in a room that's 150 square metres. We would maintain that there is absolutely no need for such a large community room. What is the size of the main part of the hall? Because we have plenty of other places where the large groups can meet. So we think the whole scale of this is unjustified. We also think that a 20-year lease is unjustified because we read in the paper over and over again that rugby has been recognised as causing a great deal of injury, much more than most other forms of organised sport. And we believe that 20 years, that rugby will have faded away long before the 20 years is up. So maybe it should be something like a 10-year lease with the option to renew. And most of all, we are appalled to read that council is asked to consider funding the facility. It's a bit of a strange report, really, because the purpose is to provide information, but the conclusion is for council to help fund a facility which council assured us only 2 months ago it will not fund. On 23rd of December, in response to concerns expressed by non-sport stakeholders, council sought to assure us in an 8-page document council's response to questions raised at meetings facilitated by Lucy Cole Edelson on the 9th and 10th of December. And under the subheading, concern that council will need to bail out the rugby club, council has assured us that, and I'm quoting, the construction of the proposed sports and community facility will be managed by council and funded entirely through grants secured by the rugby club, committed funds from the club's savings, and contributions from club members and other members of the community that want to see modern facilities in Hunters Hill. Contractual commitments to construction will not be made until all funds are in place. Now, the MO reported on 23rd of November.
Excuse me, Dr. Sharp.
Says clearly that the club has $150,000.
Is there a motion to extend? Councillor McLaughlin, Councillor Sanderson seconded. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Sorry, Dr. Sharp, you may continue.
Yeah. So the club actually had $150,000 and said it was confident to raise this to $400,000. Today, this would be an amazing feat of fundraising, and we need to know who is offering this additional amount of $1.1 million and what they expect in return. Nobody gives $1.1 million without some expectation. One might expect the project to be secure with an additional 1.1 million, but now, to top it off, we have a request for council to make a further cash contribution to the project. Further surprised me because I wasn't aware that council had already agreed to make any cash contribution. We don't accept the argument given for a cash contribution, which is a contribution by council would be an acknowledgement that council has community service to supporting groups in general. We'd like to remind council that indeed it has a community service obligation to proceed on the many, many other proposals included in the recently adopted plan of management for Boronia Park, for which no other funding has been announced. It certainly has no obligation to fund a project which has assured us it will not fund. We had hoped that Anthony Roberts' grant of $1 million would help in this regard. After all, in his press release, he said the money was to fix up the grandstand, build a new amenity, netball courts, general improvements to the park itself, given to the clubhouse. So to summarise the view, obviously out of control and still has no business case. Council has reversed a position made, or is asked to reverse a position made on council letterhead less than 2 months ago, and council must honour its written assurance that all funds must come from the rugby club. They must be received by council before any contractual commitments to construction are made. And finally, council is proposing a structure that will require the rugby club to contribute 1.5 million without revealing any obligations associated with the $1.1 million. And on top of that, would like council to contribute money. We're not very happy. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Dr. Sharp? If there, oh yes, Councillor McLaughlin.
It's not for Dr. Sharp, but thank you for your presentation. It's just to, through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager. Dr. Sharp has said that we no longer have a contractual commitment we have said that we wouldn't spend any funds unless we had, gone through a very rigorous process. And I remember there was something where we said that we wouldn't spend any money until we had, assessed all of the risk involved in all of that. And I think that's still the case, isn't that right?
Madam General Manager,
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. To clarify, the club have not requested that council contribute funds. The comment and to clarify, funds have not been identified to contribute towards the project from council. However, the comment is made in the report, as it stated, that it is unusual for a council to develop such a facility with purely external funds. And at the recent strategy workshop, there was discussion around the sustainability elements of the building and whether or not if that is something that the council would like to see, whether the council would like to contribute funds towards those particular elements as suggested in the report. But to clarify, the council is not committed to contributing funds to this project.
So the upshot, I guess, is that when all of this is when we finally get a facility finalised at the design stage and we get ready for the DA stage, then we will be looking again at what our requirements are, what requirements might be needed.
Is that a question or a statement?
It's really just to
Okay.
summarise.
Yeah, thank you. Are there any further questions of Dr. Sharp? If not, thank you very much for your presentation today, Dr. Sharp. We now have a few more speakers, do we? Yes. Okay. Mr. Peter McFarlane, could you please give us your presentation?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. I note in the recommendations of the report in front of you is the endorsement of a community room in the proposed facility for Boronia Park. I strongly believe that this is an absolutely critical part of the proposed building, offering a space that supports sporting clubs and that they have been asking for more than 40 years. Although we exist to promote our sports, the importance of sporting clubs to the social fabric of our communities cannot be overstated. They provide touch points for people across our community, promoting interaction and engagement. We have over 500 playing members of our club, the vast majority being kids under 16. But the real number of engaged members of our sporting club community spread way beyond this. Parents, friends, supporters, and our extensive ex-player network all bring life and vibrancy to the club. At Hunners Hill Rugby, we are very proud of the fact that we are a cradle-to-grave club, providing opportunity to stay engaged from age 4 to 84. It is the intergenerational support that this approach provides that keeps our club strong. Many of our older members have been involved for well over 50 years. And although I probably shouldn't be telling council this, the ashes of a number of past members have been spread on their sacred Boronia Park. This place means that much to us. Successes for sporting clubs is often measured by the number of trophies in the cabinet. But winning football matches is not the main thing most people get out of our club. Over a glass of wine on a Friday evening, watching the under-10s strut their stuff, while turning sausages on the barbie on a Saturday arvo, or while cheering on the famous black and white hoops from the sidelines, relationships, friendships form. Relationships that are critical to each individual, but also for the creation of strong communities. Over the years, we have been forced to have these experiences outdoors, subjected to the weather conditions of the day. There is no doubt this has hampered our efforts to bring people into the Hunters Hill family. The impacts of social isolation have been highlighted over the past year by the pandemic. It is critical that we have spaces that provide more opportunities for social inclusion and engagement. But this space at Boronia Park needs to be fit for purpose. It needs to allow enough space to support our AGMs and our committee meetings, hold referee training and coaching courses, put on simple family dinners to support our parents, hold our fundraising season launch or our end of season awards. And of course, it needs to allow our members to engage and socialise with each other. These are the things that are critical to the operation and continued success of our community sporting clubs. We only get one chance to get this right for now and the generations to come. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. McFarlane? Councillor Miles?
Thank you, Peter. Could you possibly expand on the need for the club to have that sort of recreational space for, you know, the once a season type events that you're usually holding offside, or the after? I mean, really, it'll be improving. You would imagine the noise and the current situation where after the season's ended, everyone congregates on the field for a drink or a reminisce.
Yeah, so currently we do tend to hold our after game events or even our Friday night junior events centred around that space in front of the grandstand. But what we're hoping to get out of a community room is that we will be able to do those sort of things inside, out of the weather. As you say, it'll probably be less noisy than what we are now. Yeah, just in a little bit more comfort, I guess, a little bit more of the expectations for sporting clubs and for community groups in this day and age.
Are there any further questions from Mr. McFarlane? If not, thank you very much for your presentation, Mr. McFarlane. We have other speakers. Is that Mr. Curtin? Okay. Andrew Curtin, could you do your presentation, please? You need to unmute, so there's a... Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and councillors. I'm just here to also talk about the facility at Boronia Park. I'm coming from a background of having been involved heavily in the planning, fundraising and construction of a number of community assets in Hunters Hill. Firstly, with the Riverside Preschool, and secondly with Villa Maria Primary School, where I was involved in fundraising, planning and the project management of building the playground there. As you councils will know, that most of the money for the Riverside Preschool was raised by volunteers, but the preschool is now a community asset. And in the case of this facility at Boronia Park, I understand that is exactly what will happen again, that council, the community members of Hunters Hill are lucky enough to have volunteers who are committed with no other purpose but to provide a facility for the community of Hunters Hill. And there is a budget of $3 million, I believe, which will be put to building that facility before it's essentially handed to council. I can't tell you how fortunate we are to have such people in Hunters Hill who are prepared to do this for absolutely no financial gain, except, and the only reason they're doing it is because they are part of this community. You might also know that I was heavily involved in my time in Hunters Hill with the Hunters Hill Sailing Club. The Hunters Hill Sailing Club is a great community asset for Hunters Hill, and as you know, is an extremely busy place. In my time at Hunters Hill Sailing Club, you will also know that we have a very large community space at Hunters Hill. I believe that community space is almost double the size of the proposed community space for the facility in question. We have used that place at Hunters Hill for meetings, for training, for briefings, all the time as a club. And the club is not just about what happens on the field, it is about what happens off the field in spaces like the community space being proposed for Boronia Park. For example, if you were to hold a tournament at Hunters Hill for, say, under 11s rugby, consisting of 20 teams from all over Sydney, you have to have a place where you can sit down and brief the coaches and the officials on how the tournament will run and how it will be kept a safe and great event for all those involved. It's inconceivable.
Mr. Curtin, could you just wait for a moment? Councillor Lachlan and Councillor Miles has seconded. All those in favour of extension of time, declare that carried unanimously. Sorry, Mr. Curtin, it's just a procedural matter.
Thank you, Ross. You know, it's inconceivable to think of a modern community club without such a space. The fact that the club will essentially be paying for the space, the fact that you can't go back and redo these things if you get it wrong. No one in the projects that I've been involved with building community assets for Hunters Hill has ever come up to me and said, you know, you've made this thing too large. It is always too small, and it is always too small because our community is growing. So looking to plan assets that will be used by the community for the foreseeable future, I would encourage councillors to accept the advice of the people who are actually volunteering their time to run this great community club, that sort of space is needed for, you know, the growth and the fantastic things that they do for the community by producing a community asset. So I'd just like to wrap up by saying I think Peter hit the nail on the head when he said that, you know, it's not just about what happens on the field, the playing on the field, the community, the Hunters Hill rugby community, and any other community sporting club that wants to use that facility. It's much more than about just the kids. It's about the entire community, and that community needs a space to gather and to form community. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you, Mayor and councillors.
Thank you for your presentation. Are there any questions of Mr. Curtin? There are none. So thank you very much, Mr. Curtin. We've got one more presentation, but that'll be read out by Mel. Yes.
Yeah. So this is from Ben Wood, the president of the Ryan Hunters Hill Cricket Club. And he says, it's pleasing that the report to council is generally supportive of the proposal, and I reiterate the support of the Ryan Hunters Hill Cricket Club. The club views this project as a key legacy project that will benefit not only the main sporting users, but the broader community at large. The current facilities at Boronia Park are outdated and unsuitable for the broad community use, and they do not recognise the rapidly growing female participation in sports such as cricket and rugby. The current facilities are also poorly located in terms of B2 and B3 and the netball courts, lack accessibility, and they do not provide the required public amenity and safety aspects that are enjoyed at other similar facilities in adjacent LGAs. The option to provide for the broad range of users at Boronia Park and the opportunities that a new modern facility will create should not be discounted. A facility that recognises the diversity of the broader community cannot be underestimated and should only be viewed as a positive addition to the local location that is close to the hearts of many. We look forward to working with all the key stakeholders to bring this important community facility to fruition and encourage council to recognise the benefits of such a facility by continuing to support the project and assist in bringing it to fruition.
Good, that concludes the debate. The presentations. Councillor Miles, you wish to speak.
I'd like to move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Collins. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Miles?
I will briefly, Mr. Mayor. As is set out in the motion, this is the next stage, and in the body of the report, you can see sort of the indicative timeline that we're working to try and deliver this community facility. I would note that in the motion itself, we are developing a business case to providing a community facility component of this development. I would say that, you know, to build a business case around this, we are only building a business case for the potential ongoing costs and maintenance of the facility, and any shortfall or in-kind donation that we might make to the facility actually being constructed. Because at the end of the day, the Hunters Hill Rugby Club have been incredibly generous in terms of their contribution to this project so far. State and federal governments have put in sizable amounts of sports funding. So realistically, the business case would look at any contribution that council would make, and any contribution that we would have to make as a continuing maintenance budget to a building that is essentially being gifted to council by state and federal government funds and the rugby club. So I think it's important to note the generosity of the clubs in their fundraising efforts. I think it's important to note that they have allocated significant funds already, and I would suggest that it would be a very unusual situation. I don't think you would find any other council in metropolitan Sydney that contributed nothing to an asset that at the end of the day they would end up owning. I know that Councillor McLaughlin raised at the last discussion about the potential of contributing funds to building a more sustainable building. I'm very supportive of that. But at the end of the day, we need to build the right facilities for Hunters Hill. We know what the clubs need in terms of upgrading their sporting rooms and the change rooms, the canteen, and all the infrastructure that goes with the sport. But it's really up to council and understanding our needs and the community's needs in developing this community room. And I'm very supportive of the concept. I think that it is crucial that we do this once and do it correctly, rather than nitpick and niggle about, you know, sizing here or sizing there. This is something that we know that council is requiring. It's quite frankly the only new facility that has been proposed in my time at council, and there's a lot of other things on the agenda, but this will be the only building apart from a toilet block at Riverglade Reserve that I've dealt with in my 9 years on council. So I think that we need to get on and do it. And I think that the timeline that's outlined in the report's brilliant. I think that council does need to think about contributing funds to a building that at the end of the day, we will have management and control over, and that will be our asset. And I think that, again, I thank the clubs for their generosity so far, and in their generosity in committing to fundraise further to provide a community asset.
Are there any speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Sanderson? You need to unmute.
Mr. Mayor, as I agree fully with all of the presentations, possibly with the exception of Dr. Sharp's about the future of rugby, but I do have some concerns about the motion itself. I have no concerns about the direction we're heading. I think the motion gets a little bit ahead of itself. I note that at point 3, it makes reference to a policy that, when I looked into, refers to a piece of New South Wales legislation that was in fact repealed in 1999. So council policy seems to be well out of date. That seems to be being used for the justification for having the facility open till 11 o'clock. So I really have concerns about point 3 of the motion. I also believe that we should be waiting for this business case. I don't think there's anything that this motion progresses. I think we can leave it until March, until we have the benefit of the business case, to put a motion like this. What I would do at this point in time, that if for some reason that this motion does not succeed, I would foreshadow an alternate motion, which would be, I'm sorry, I only have this handwritten at this point in time. I scribbled it out earlier in the meeting.
So that we can get it accurate, could you read it out slowly, please?
Yes, I will. 1, that the report be received and noted, which is precisely what the original motion or the recommendation says. 2, that council express concern that the eastern facing terrace is not being further progressed. Got that one? And 3, the council look forward to receiving the business case currently being prepared to guide specification and design of the community room.
You might just have that read out when the typing's complete. Yes. Are you able to show that on the screen or?
Mayor and Councillor Sanderson could please reread the
Yeah,
points
sure,
again.
sure. Okay. Councillor Sanderson, could you please restate that for Shadow?
The whole thing, or did I think we got number 2?
Yeah, just so we've got it accurate.
Okay. 1, that the report be received and noted. 2, that council express concern that the eastern facing terrace is not being progressed or is not being further progressed. And 3, the council look forward to receiving the business case currently being prepared to guide specification specification and design of the community room.
Just wait a moment, we'll check that that's now been captured. So we'll just share that up on the screen. Foreshadowed motion is down the bottom of the screen there. Is that correct, Councillor Sanderson? Can you see it?
There's a typo toward the end of point 2, I think. Is not being progressed further, or is not being further progressed was as I read it out. Anyway, that's irrelevant. The order of those two words doesn't matter. Look forward to receiving. To guide specification, and instead of the second guide, that be specification and design of the community room.
Okay, that's a foreshadowed motion, so that doesn't become part of the process unless the current motion is lost. Now we need to move to debate. No, we've had some discussion on the motion to date. Councillor Miles has spoke to it. Councillor McLaughlin, you spoke to it too?
No.
Councillor McLaughlin.
I'd like to speak in support of the current motion. I think it's terribly important we don't make any decisions and box us into a design that might end up compromising the overall design of this building, just because we have some concerns, or there are concerns about the size of that community facility. I think it's a bit early in the process to be doing that. I think that the size that has been contemplated is not out of keeping with some of the other community halls that we have. And the main thing that I would note is that, correct me if I'm wrong, but this community facility that we're contemplating in Boronia Park, I think is possibly the only community facility that we would have in that particular area. That might be a question through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager, but I know that this is the list that we have in the business paper isn't a comprehensive list of all of our community facilities, but we don't appear to have a facility of note in the Boronia Park area for the community of Boronia Park to use. So I think there's probably a business case in itself because we don't have one in that area. So that I think it's terribly important that we have a community facility that is fit for purpose and it's future-proofed. As Mr. Curtin said, we need to be able to have a facility that will take us into the future. So I'm not worried about that at this point. I think it's too early in the process to be making firm decisions about the size, the need. I think that will all come out in a design that that is a really good quality design. So I would support the motion as it is.
Any speakers against? Speakers for? Right of reply, Councillor Miles. No right of reply. Okay, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. Is that unanimous, Councillor?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, unanimously. Okay. That now brings us to item 4.6, which I'll just turn to, which is traffic committee item 38 Lindhurst Street, proposed no parking. Now we have a written submission that will be read out. So could you please read that?
Okay, this is from Chris and Jason Mavridis. As owners of property at 4 Lindhurst Crescent, Hunters Hill, we strongly object to the proposed parking restrictions for the street area adjacent to number 12 Lindhurst Crescent. We have already been heavily inconvenienced with the no parking restrictions that are implemented directly in front of our property and across the street a few years back. We still think that it was a terrible idea and should be reviewed at some stage. This new no parking proposal serves no purpose and it would eliminate the few remaining parking spots available for residents on our street. Furthermore, when cars are parked on both sides of the street adjacent to number 12, there is no obstruction to other vehicles passing through the streets. There is certainly no obstruction to number 12 as their driveway is on the downward slope of Lindhurst Crescent. Therefore, we do not see any good reason for you to go through with this completely unnecessary proposal. Thank you for hearing us out, Chris and Jason Mavridis.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to move that we defer this report.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Collins. Councillor Miles, do you wish to speak to?
I have been contacted with by a number of residents from Lindhurst adjoining this strip. I know it's been a long-running issue. I know it's been to traffic committee before, but I think that in the interests of making sure that all the views of the residents down there are heard, that we defer this report and probably talk to the adjoining residents and probably put it back to Traffic Committee.
Okay, are there any speakers against the motion? The motion is to defer for further consultation with residents. Any speakers for? Councillor Crasoy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Did Councillor Miles have a seconder? Sorry, I was looking at the
Yes, Councillor Cole.
paper. Yeah. No, I would support that deferral. I actually thought that we had already asked for this report to be brought because there was some concern for the residents. So I'm just a little surprised that it hasn't been more thorough, and there are still residents who don't feel that they were consulted enough on it. But so yeah, totally support deferring.
Is there any further debate? Right of reply, Councillor Miles.
Not necessary, Mr. Mayor.
Put the motion to defer for further community consultation. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. Has the minutes got that? Yeah. Okay, so that now takes us to item 4.7, which deals with reconstruction program for Gaza Avenue and High Street, Hunters Hill. There are speakers. Are they in person? Oh, yes, Gloria Curry has arrived. Is there further speakers?
One written submission.
One written submission. Okay, well, we'll hand over to you, Gloria, to make your presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity to address council.
Could you please turn your volume up a little bit? We're finding it hard to hear. Sorry to do that.
Sorry.
That's better. Perfect. Yep.
Better?
Got you. Yep.
Okay, they've got me. Thank you so much for the opportunity to address council once again. Just want to indicate that I'm extremely disappointed with the report outcome, that residents of Gaza Avenue must learn to live with the new works, and we'll just have to get used to it. I find it disheartening that going forward, council will ensure that the raised parking bays will not be installed anywhere in the area, but yet we at Gaza have to learn to live with it. Firstly, I'd like to object to the recommendations of the report dated the 15th of the 2nd, point 2 being that the damage to parking bays was caused by vehicles parking on asphalt contrary to roadwork barricading. That was not the case. The asphalt continued to deteriorate a week or two post completion, and there's currently the caravan that's parked outside number 13 the wheel has sunk into the asphalt, so there's indication that the asphalt has not set or cured properly. Point 3 regarding installation of the hill-proof grids. I think it's just a band-aid solution to greater problems that's been caused by the drain pipes, and that hasn't been addressed. Point 4, planting trees will not really rectify safety concerns, alleviate our fears. One of the points is, how will the trees grow? And if they do grow, will they damage pavements and footpaths? Given that councils have attended Gaza Avenue and have seen personally firsthand how slippery the rolled curbs are, I question if anyone would be confident to have their parents, themselves, their children, or their friends use the gutters or the rolled curb safely when entering or exiting a vehicle, and across any weather conditions. In my opinion, if council is satisfied that no harm will result of the roadworks that was constructed, to include the rolled curbs, the visibility issues, the poor stormwater pipes, then council needs to accept future liability should any harm come to persons or to property as a result of the roadworks. Secondly, I have concerns about the communication engagement process. The December report recommends that Gaza Avenues be advised of the recommendations. I felt that the entire report should have been available and given to all affected residents prior to undertaking the feedback process. I'm also a little bit baffled as to the purpose of the questionnaire. It felt like it was more like a mark your own homework day, Instead, it should have had more in-depth questions that address Mr. Strickland's findings point by point in the December report. So I don't think there was any benefit in doing the questionnaire. I also hold, there was a couple of issues with the...
Mrs. Corrie, could just hold for a second. Councillor Sanderson, Councillor McLaughlin have moved extension of time. All those in favour, declare it unanimous. Sorry, you may.
That's right. Thank you. Thank you. There were just a few issues with the questionnaire. There was no reply date, so residents were away on holidays or didn't realise that there was a deadline looming. The question limited a lot of Mr. Strickland's recommendations. There was limited space to provide feedback. Respondents who aren't aware of Mr. Strickland's recommendations weren't able to address those concerns point by point as well. And traditionally, verbal questionnaires are subject to biased influence subconsciously, of course, and parties that are involved have a vested interest should not normally participate in collecting the feedback. I've got a few issues that I think my questions remain unanswered in the report. The roll top, our safety concerns in the December reports brush aside our concerns, saying the roll top curbs are a standard device used in public road situations throughout Australia. There's a lot of questions there. What are the heights of the other roll tops? Are the roll top surfaces slippery? Are there any other hindering surfaces that may influence whether or not our raised parking bays are to the same standard? The safety with the parking bays, there's not enough flat footing placement upon entering or exiting the car. Again, how can this be rectified? The street design and viability, the 14th of December report stated that the road was previously kid-friendly. Now it's not, indicating that the onus, there's no problems, whether it's just the onus is now on the driver, rather than having a safe and high quality road design that's been pushed aside. And we still haven't had the matter regarding the drains, why the placement of the pipes so shallow, what is technical specifications or requirements, because a lot of people's pipes can be seen just sitting under the surface of the grass or through the grass. Who will be responsible when and if they break or get blocked? So they're the issues that I feel like haven't been answered in the reports, and I would love further resident consultation with all the facts given to them. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Councillor Krasoy.
Just one, Mr. Mayor, through you. As I understand it, the point about the raised parking bays across the whole suburb was an amendment that Councillor Sanderson proposed at a previous meeting that we decided not to adopt into that particular motion, and hasn't been brought to council, and it's not a policy of council. Is that correct?
Madam General Manager.
Through Mr. Mayor,
I believe that's okay.
that is correct.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, thank you very much for your presentation. We'll now hear from a written submission, and over to Mel.
This is Miss Louise Howard, and she said, "Dear Council and Councillors, firstly, it's very disappointing we were only notified of the final report yesterday afternoon, Sunday the 14th of the 2nd, 21, and have only limited time to read and respond to the report. Thank you to Ross for informing us. Secondly, in regards to the survey, it would be more legitimate if the survey had been implemented by an independent party, not the engineers at council, who have a personal interest in defending their poor management of the project. In saying that, it is positive that the residents of Gaza Avenue were able to finally have an independent voice to state their concerns. Clearly, from the survey, people are frustrated that there was no community consultation and that the project is a complete waste of money. which all know and agree from the last meeting. In response to the report, in brackets conclusion, it is clear that there will be no solution for residents due to the cost and the variety of other projects, in brackets High Street. It is also clear the residents of Gaza Avenue will have to live with the emotional stress and safety issues and the risk of someone being injured due to the many factors already addressed. It is also clear the council have decided other projects are more important, and the residents of Gaza Avenue will just need to live with a project that will have ongoing issues, consequences, and safety issues, all very disappointing. In response to the recommendations, 1, rectify minor defects in the work, including damage caused by vehicles parked on the fresh asphalt, too thin and contrary to roadworks barricades. Yes, of course. Plus all damage to nature strips where people park their cars. Residents have paid for their own grass. 2, replace stormwater grates with heel-safe grates. Yes, of course. 3, develop a tree planting scheme in consultation with residents as detailed in the report to council on the 14th of December 2020. Why would more trees solve the problem? This is crazy. As we all agree, this project should never have been approved for a myriad of reasons, and this a very disappointing result for residents of Gaza Avenue. We, the residents, are having to live with this ridiculous parking whilst others will now have just what we want, a normal resurfaced road and gutter. This is very inequitable, and we should not be made to feel financially responsible for the decisions made by the council. I am, however, happy no other residents in Hunters Hill will have to go through the same stress and anguish we have for a safer road. Regards, Louise Howard.
Right. That completes presentations to council. Is there a motion in regard to this matter? Councillor Cressoy.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to put an alternate motion, which I sent to the General Manager earlier today.
Is that available on the system? Yeah, okay, could you bring that to the screen, please? Just one moment while we get it up on the screen, and then I'll call for a seconder after people have had a chance to. Would you like to read it out, Councillor Cressoy? Or?
I'll read it from the council screen because in bringing, I lose my other screen, so I'll read it straight from here.
Yes, that's fine.
That the report be received and noted. 2, that council undertake the rectification of defects and safety concerns in Gaza Avenue, including to the asphalt surface in the parking bays, repair and maintenance of damaged new turf, and reported perception of slip hazards on the rolled curb. 3, that council replace the existing galvanised gratings in the footpath in Gaza Avenue with heel-safe grates. Delete 4, delete 5, delete 6. A new item 4, that in the development of the Boronia Park local area traffic management plan that the council resolved earlier this evening, item 3.1, and in consultation with the residents, I underline that, council consider signposting Gaza Avenue as a residents only thoroughfare with suitable children playing signage at each end of the street. New item 5, and this is in relation to High Street, which this report is also referring to, that after consideration of the Boronia Park local area traffic management plan, a fiscally responsible recommendation for High Street be brought to council to address rat running and speed, stormwater and pedestrian safety.
Could I just ask one clarification? If you could go back to the top there, when you read that out, it might just been an oversight, but you, in the first sentence, didn't include minor defects. Do you want that deleted, or do you want just...
I'd like that deleted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Minor, yeah.
take minor out, yep.
Okay.
Or strike it through, yep.
Yep, whatever. Yep. Okay, is there a seconder to that motion? Has everybody had a chance to familiarise themselves? Councillor McLaughlin, you've seconded the motion.
I'm considering seconding the motion. I just have a question though, through you, Mr. Mayor, and it's probably for the General Manager rather than Councillor Crassoy, and just regards to the, I think it's, I've lost it on the screen now, but you talked about making Gaza Avenue, or considering making Gaza Avenue a residents-only children playing street. Does that have to go to the traffic committee, or is that just something that we can do as part of our report, or as part of our council?
I'll ask the General Manager to answer that for you.
Through Mr. Mayor to the Director. Neil, could you outline the process?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, that isn't regulatory signage. So I think we're talking about local traffic, such as the signage that you'd have when you're doing a local area traffic management study. You place signs up that show the house with the kids sort of running hand in hand. I think you've probably seen that signage, and it's not regulatory, but it's intended to educate drivers.
So it's easy enough to do?
Yes.
Okay, I'll second the motion then, thank you.
Councillor McLaughlin has now seconded the motion. Do you wish to speak further to your motion, Councillor Crassoy?
Can I ask a question just before that happens? Can we get that sent around? This is a lot of, can we get a copy of that email so we can have it in front of us?
The General Manager will forward that to your inbox.
Thank you.
Just wait a moment till that's done.
Apologies, councillors, I'm just sending it to you now.
Give you a moment to open your inbox and have a look at that if you wish to. Because we've got a reduced screen at the moment, I can't see Councillor Collins. Have you been able to view that? Are you happy to?
I can see, yes.
Are you happy to proceed?
Sure.
Okay. So we have a mover with Councillor Crassoy, a seconder in Councillor McLaughlin. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Crassoy?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, I will. And I will start firstly by apologising to the residents of Gaza Avenue who will be disappointed in my proposal here. I am also disappointed in the process that I feel wasn't followed as it should be, and I appreciate the offerings of the General Manager and senior staff in acknowledging that the process could have and should have been done far, far better than it was. But what this motion attempts to do is come up with a solution that we can all live with, if not love. So to repair, based on the report, to repair to previous state, Gaza Avenue, or just to give it a resurfaced road, would simply put council in a really bad financial position on the reports this year. And I know that doesn't sound like a good enough reason, but when you're a councillor, it's our job to advocate on behalf of the residents, but also advocate back to the residents. And what I'm advocating to you, the residents, is that our council needs to remain financially viable, and we need to make the best choices that we can for the safety and good of the whole community. So while I wouldn't rule out that down the track, you know, let's say in a year or 2 years, if this were to come back to council again, you might not rule out having some success at that time. But based on this year's budget, I feel that this, what I'm offering here is the best that we can do as a council to demonstrate that we've heard you and we agree with your concerns and that we want to make it as right as possible. I think all the points, if you all had a chance to read them, are straightforward. I completely agree with suggesting that the damage to the road was done by the residents. There were clear defects and they've only been exacerbated by normal use, and they definitely need to be fixed by the contractor. So thank you to the council officer for reporting that that will be done. Those few things that we can do to alleviate that work will be very helpful, I hope. The idea of planting trees was just an idea chucked around at a brainstorm about trying to help make the street feel safer. It was never supposed to go into a formal recommendation. I know because I'm the one who chucked the idea up there, and the feedback that I believe the council officers received was from many residents that they didn't want trees. Once again, if the residents of Gaza feel they'd like street trees, as the only street in Hunters Hill that doesn't have street trees, they can bring that to council another time. It doesn't need to be in this motion or considered as part of this solution. Item 4, I feel that one of the biggest concerns residents raised to me was their fear that their children would no longer be able to play safely on the street. And I feel that while they're token, those residents only signs and pictures of children playing, and I saw one in a suburb in St Ives the other day where the wheelie bins had a picture of a little kid running onto the road. And, you know, there's all sorts of ways to make drivers go, okay, there's obviously lots of kids around here, and it shouldn't make kids feel safe to run around on the road. But I feel that this could be a solution. It may have to go to the Area Traffic Committee, depending on what the recommendation of the local area traffic management plan comes up with. So I wouldn't suggest that item 4 should be in any way prescriptive. It should answer to the master plan that we now will be putting in place, that I'm glad to hear about. And lastly, on High Street, I also believe that we thankfully arrested a potential another choice for road surfacing and parking bays that may not, while looking very nice and being a very good solution and being current best practice, may not have been the best outcome for that particular stretch of High Street. It may be, and we will find out when we have a local area traffic management plan. Yay. The residents up there have been saying for a very long time that they need a safe way to get across this road. And previous ideas have been taken to the residents and taken to traffic committees. The local traffic committee, it had to be over 9 years ago because I was on it back then, and I remember High Street being an issue then. So hopefully that item 5 will just capture a solution for High Street, because I do believe that nothing more should happen in Boronia Park until it answers to a master plan. Thank you.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for the motion? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My initial inclination, as you would recall from the motion I put forward back in December, was for the job to be rectified. At the end of the day, I think the choices that should have been made were between a simple mill and fill of the street, or alternatively the most elaborate one that's been put forward as a solution now. We should have been dealing with that matter back then. Instead of that, we seem to have proceeded with what I would regard as being the worst option. Having said that, I think this was supposed to be a learning exercise, but in many respects, I don't believe we're learning. You only need to look at the terminology used in this motion to suggest that we haven't learned. I mean, I think it's not acceptable to be suggesting that the residents are in any way at fault over this matter.
I just think we need to clarify which motion we're dealing with. Councillor Crassoy has removed those comments.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was referring to the original motion and the words that said, some of which were damaged by vehicles parking on fresh asphalt too soon and contrary
Point
to...
of order, Mr. Mayor, we're actually talking about the motion that's on the table. There was no original motion.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, point taken. Could you please speak to the motion that we have before us, please? Thank
you, Mr. Mayor. I would, in that light, I was leading to suggesting a very minor amendment of Councillor Crassoy's motion, and that is that in point 2, the words perception of be removed. I think there are genuine concerns there. I don't think those words are required. I wonder whether Councillor Crassoy would accept removal of those 2 words.
Councillor Crassoy, you...
Sure.
Good.
Okay. Before that, we need a seconder to the amendment. Councillor McLaughlin. Okay. Put the amendment, all those... Oh, no, it's been incorporated in the motion. So
been accepted. And the other amendment I would suggest would be the correction of the word it's spelt thoroughfare. I believe that should be thoroughfare.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. I can always count on you.
I think
thank you. Look, if
that's been accepted by the mover.
Happy to accept it.
Yep. Okay.
Look, thank you. Otherwise, I believe this is on the later part of the motion. I think it's precisely the right way to go to have this investigation done of traffic in the area. It may throw up solutions that would be inconsistent with any work on High Street at this point in time. So that part of the motion I thoroughly endorse.
Are there any speakers against the motion? Before I reply, I'll just make a brief comment. I think there are clear lessons to be learnt in this process, and I think as a council we need to reflect on those and see how we may adapt or change our policy. That'll be a process that we may follow later on. Right of reply, Councillor Crassoy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I will just wrap up again by giving my personal apologies as a councillor to the residents of Gaza that I can't offer them another solution from my point of view anyway. I would also like to thank the General Manager and the council officers who have attempted to I'll say pick up this ball, having come to it reasonably late in the game, and attempted to find a solution that was financially viable and to support the councillors and the residents in understanding it. I know that people aren't always happy with the outcome they get, and I know that sometimes you can put a lot of effort into proving yourself right when you're not. And so thank you to the General Manager and the council officers as well. And let's just hopefully get this as fixed as we can and hopefully have an okay outcome.
That concludes debate. I'll now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that unanimous. We now move to the next item, which is 4.11. That's a fair way into our paper here. I'll just find it. 4.10. Which relates to the Huntersville Bridge Club licence renewal. And we have a speaker for this item, which is Carol Sheldrake. You're right? Yep. Okay. Mrs. Sheldrake, would you like to do your presentation, please?
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Ross Williams and councillors. As Ross has said, I'm Carol Sheldrake and I'm also the president of the Hunters Hill Bridge Club. The Bridge Club is a large community group within Hunters Hill with over 340 members, and we are still growing. It's a volunteer-run, not-for-profit organisation with a reputation as a very professionally run bridge club. The club has been part of the Hunters Hill community for nearly 50 years, and during this period we have had a long-standing and continuous association with the Hunters Hill Council. We've been at the Henley Bowling Club for nearly 11 years with a sole occupancy agreement for Monday to Friday usage since 2012. At no time have we had any usage over the weekends. During this period, we paid council a significant yearly rental, as noted in the paper before you, of $34,000 a year in 2021. The Hunters Hill Bridge Club contributes significantly to the fabric of the local community through its operation. It provides a fantastic social amenity through social interactions for members and contributes immensely to the good mental health and individual well-being of members. All players are welcome to participate at club sessions. It's open to all. Our problem is now in terms of the licence. We have been in discussion with council officers over the last months on the key terms of our licence. In recent weeks, it appears that there has been a significant shift to the original negotiated agreement. Firstly, council agreed that the Bridge Club would have accessible storage for our equipment to enable the regular pack up and set up should council rent out the hall to other users during the week. We've now learned that council plans to demolish the small room near the kitchen to enlarge the hall. There is no plan at the moment to replace this with alternate accessible storage. This loss of accessible storage will affect our ability to operate on a daily basis. Secondly, the recent advice that council will undertake significant works at the Henley Bowling Club without any reference to council providing the club with alternate, appropriately sized, accessible accommodation if the hall is not available. Thirdly, the negotiated discussion was that council will give the club reasonable advance notice if pack-up is required midweek or at the weekend. This is not noted in the present licence terms. And finally, we are aware that at present council can only negotiate a one-year lease, but there is a lack of mention of the opportunity for ongoing tenure in 2022. The club prepares its yearly program in October for the following year and needs some security for 2022. Therefore, for the club, the issues are the need for accessible storage to enable the club to manage the usage of the venue by other users midweek, a guarantee of council providing suitably sized alternate venues if the hall is not available for the club due to the council undertaking work as listed in the document at the site. And thirdly, an inclusion in the terms that council will give the club reasonable advance notice for pack-up if the room is leased out to other users midweek. And finally, the offer of ongoing security of tenure for 2022 and onwards. Thank you for your time and the opportunity to address council. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Sheldrake. Are there any questions of Mrs. Sheldrake? If not, thank you very much for your presentation. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to put an alternate recommendation. It was emailed through to the General Manager late this afternoon.
Has that been emailed to councillors or do we have that available?
Councillors, I will send it through to you now.
Move it across a little bit because on my screen anyway, it's being blocked by the councillors. While we're doing that, Councillor Sanderson, would you like to read out your motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. One, the Hunters Hill Bridge Club, the Bridge Club as I'll refer to it afterwards, be allowed to continue its use of the Henley Community Centre, which I'll refer to as centre later in the motion, under existing terms and conditions until A, a further report on the matter has been brought back to Council. Council resolves to adopt the new licence agreement and the new licence agreement is executed. 2, that a further report to Council contain the terms of the licence agreement, including that A, the term of the licence agreement be 1 year from the date of execution. B, the licence fee for the 1 year term be $33,896, which is the same as in the report. C, the Bridge Club pay $4,600 per annum pro rata while COVID cleaning requirements continue. D, the Bridge Club have exclusive right to the use of the office and a lockable storage room of at least 10 square metres in area on the same level as the Bridge Games are conducted. E, the Bridge Club have the right to use the main hall, 1, from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m, Mondays, Wednesdays and Thursdays. 2, from 9 a.m. to 10:30 p.m. on Tuesdays. And 3, from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Fridays. During these times, the club will have shared access to the kitchen and amenities. F, parking and existing access for those with limited mobility will be available at times when the Bridge Club is in occupation. G, on the giving of 5 days notice by Council, the Bridge Club will move its tables and other items into the office or lockable storage or lockable storage room to allow Council to license to other users the main hall when it's not being used by the Bridge Club on not more than 2 occasions per week. H, Council be given reasonable notice of any activity that could cause disruption to the operation of the Bridge Club. I, the Bridge Club will cooperate with Council where reasonably possible to allow other licensees to use the main hall or hall of the centre and permit work to be carried out on the centre. J, in the event that renovation work prevents the use of the centre by the Bridge Club, Council will offer alternative accommodation for that time. And K, prior to the end of the licence period, the Bridge Club will be given the opportunity to negotiate a further licence agreement to provide continuity or continuation of its operation at the centre. In the event that no agreement can be reached on a further licence agreement, the Bridge Club will be given a minimum of 90 days notice to find alternative accommodation to continue their operations.
Is there a seconder to that motion? I can't see the screen. Is there a seconder? If not, Councillor Crassotti is the seconder. I was going to, if need be. Councillor Sanderson, well, before we do that, has everybody had a chance to look at that on the screens and in your inboxes? It's been read out. Councillor Sanderson, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I found this report rather disappointing in terms of the items that it left out. Even if this motion doesn't succeed, the important thing is it puts on the table a lot of issues that need to be addressed in this licence agreement. I would have thought that the correct procedure to save me all of this work would have been that the actual licence agreement be part of the paper and that we have the opportunity to read and digest that, make amendments as suited, and pass a licence agreement that's before us. As it's turned out, we have a very loose recommendation that we simply allow staff to carry on these negotiations, which potentially will leave our Bridge Club in rather dire consequences in various circumstances, because it's unclear, as Mrs. Sheldrake's pointed out, whether what will occur if they have to move out because the building has to be renovated. How they deal with notice periods. I think the agreement has to deal with notice to move equipment in and out, and so on. I mean, and we've already lost the Hunters Hill Theatre out of what is going to be our cultural hub. I think it's important that we do look after groups like this that are such an important part of the fabric of this society. The Seniors Club, as we've heard over and over again, does provide an absolutely first-class opportunity for the community engagement of people who are generally, in their senior years. I have visited the centre, and I think Mrs. Sheldrake makes some very valid points, that the office area that they currently have cannot be completely filled with items that would normally go into their storage area, because that area is required for setting up their dealings for future games, and that will not necessarily occur at the times that the games are going on. So that I think it's essential these terms be laid out. I have drawn from the report the items that the report fills out, but I think it's important that all the other details are filled in. I think it's important that this comes back to council, that we see the final version of the licence agreement, so that we have the opportunity to assess that. And I think what I have spelled out are very fair terms. It does provide for other uses of the community facility. And I think we need to be realistic here, that facility will need a fair bit of more work before it's in a state where it will be able to be leased at higher fees to other possible tenants. I think our obligation at this present time is to look after this community group who does such an amazing job for, in particular, our senior residents.
Thank you, Councillor Sanderson. Is there any speakers against the motion? Councillor Collins.
Yeah, look, I'm not really happy with this report either. There's nothing in the report we've been given to suggest that the Bridge Club are not happy with the suggested lease. So I'm only just really hearing now from the president that they're not happy with the lease. So a similar thing happened last year. I don't think we should have a lease brought to us for adoption before when both parties aren't happy. Councillor Sanderson's right to pull that up, but it's completely inappropriate for us to basically write the lease tonight. This is the first time I've seen it. So what I want to do is foreshadow a motion where basically point one of Councillor Sanderson's motion, which is to bring back a report and allow the Bridge Club to continue to conduct their business until we're happy with it. As for the terms of it, I think it's completely inappropriate for us to adopt this. I've just seen this now. There's no way that and I don't know if anyone's seen this before, but the operating hours, that's something that council staff need to work out with the Bridge Club. And if council staff can't come up with a agreement that the Bridge Club are happy with, then, you know, maybe it needs to come back to a briefing with council so we can understand. But we can't just have a report here which doesn't mention that you know, a long tenant, 10 years, has contributed a significant amount of money, and a good tenant is not happy with it. So, yeah, I'll just foreshadow that we adopt one of Councillor, or unless Councillor Sanderson would be happy to just strike out 2 and allow staff to sort of continue their negotiations as they should. I don't think that's our role to you know, do all that right now. Are you happy to strike out part 2 of your
Councillor Collins, are you moving an amendment that we
I'm just suggesting to council, if he would be happy to strike out 2, then I'd support it. Because I don't think we have what we need.
We're in a formal process. Is it an amendment you're moving, which I believe it is, to strike out point 2?
Whatever. I mean,
is there a seconder to the amendment? Councillor Miles, do you agree with the amendment, Councillor Sanderson?
No, Mr. Mayor.
No, okay.
Okay.
So we have an amendment on the table, which has been moved by Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Miles. Do you wish to speak further to your amendment, Councillor?
No, just that we need more information, and we cannot possibly. It would be very poor governance for us to adopt all of point 2, having just seen it 5 minutes ago. That's not right. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that for now.
Speakers against the amendment, Councillor McLaughlin, or for the amendment?
I'm just going to speak for the amendment, but I also just wondered if perhaps we might put in that amendment that we actually attach a copy of the licence agreement when it does come back to council, because it's highly unusual to receive a report about a renewal of a licence agreement without actually having the licence agreement attached. And I also thought that we did most of these things in committee of the whole. But look, I can't go ahead with this motion tonight because I simply haven't seen the licence agreement on which all of this is based.
That's a foreshadowed amendment.
No,
but I'm just wondering if in Councillor Collins's amendment, when the report comes back to council, which is point 1 of Councillor Sanderson's original motion, that the licence agreement is attached.
Yes, absolutely. Good point.
I'm happy as seconded too, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so that becomes part of the amendment. Any speakers against the amendment? Speakers for? Councillor Miles.
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, I guess when you're talking about, setting, 5 days notice from council to move equipment around and 90 days notice to find alternative, like that's policy on the fly that we can't really engage in. And I think that, point 1 of the motion, happy to support Councillor McLaughlin's amendment or suggested amendment. But I mean, it's not council's role to delve into this, these specifics. I mean, we should be presented the licence agreement, absolutely, but this should have been negotiated with the Bridge Club long prior to. And I mean, again, the conduct of getting these long amendments that have obviously been drafted long in advance, 5 minutes before we have the discussion, is just not the way to do business. It's unprofessional. So
point of order.
I'm happy for point 1 to go through, but point 2 can't support.
Okay. Any further debate on the amendment, Councillor Crasoy?
I just have a question, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Sanderson's point 2, through you, Mr. Mayor, has Councillor Sanderson seen a lease agreement that we haven't seen to be able to compose those points, or is this just a legal mind doing what clever legal people know how to do?
Councillor Sanderson, you wish to answer that question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did actually see an earlier version of the lease agreement that the Bridge Club has. that was certainly taken into consideration. I was made aware of the negotiations that had gone on. I had the feeling that this motion may not get through. The principal reason I have put it is to ensure that the matters that I have raised in the second point of the motion are on the books, so that they will come back, I hope, as part of a final lease agreement. I was not suggesting in the motion that this be the lease agreement. I'm just saying that these are points that I think I've set, very reasonable conditions. That can go back to negotiation, and ultimately we'll have the opportunity as a council to accept what's put before us, in the next meeting or so.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Crossway? Yep.
I have a follow-up question, if I may.
Yes, Councillor Collins.
Where did the lease agreement come from? It's a very good question. Who gave you the lease agreement? Was it the Bridge Club?
Mr. Mayor, do I answer that?
If you wish to, yes.
Yes, look, I mean, this has been going on for some time. I believe someone from the Bridge Club sent it to me.
Okay, well, we're now dealing with an amendment.
Yeah.
Further debate. Well, are there any further speakers for the amendment or against the amendment? If not, right of reply, Councillor Collins.
Yeah, first of all, I am a little uncomfortable if we are supposed to be endorsing a lease at some point. If a member of this council is also conducting discussions around this matter, I don't think that's proper. And I would just remind Councillor Sanderson that this is the negotiation of the lease is a matter for staff. It is up for us.
Point of order, Councillor Collins.
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
We're not here to comment on those sort of issues. We're here to discuss the issue which you've got an amended motion to talk to, please.
We are discussing the process of forming a lease with the Bridge Club. And that's so right. How is this not relevant, Mr. Mayor? I'm talking about the process of how we go about forming a lease.
Councillor Collins, the procedure of council is that a right of reply is to address the issues that have been raised in the debate.
It was
I
raised.
think you're going well beyond those. So
the issue was raised that we have a member of council that is. It's just completely improper. I'm simply making the point. I'm not going to push it.
Councillor Collins, it is you're casting a view that is your view, and to make accusations against another councillor is not within the spirit of our code. So could you address the issue that we're dealing with, which is the amendment
yes.
and your right of reply?
Yes, okay. Well, I will say that it's relevant, Mr. Mayor, and I will ask the question of the General Manager, if I may. To the General Manager, is it appropriate for councillors to be discussing this lease with the Bridge Club? Should we all be getting involved, or is that a matter for staff for ultimate endorsement by the councillors?
General Manager.
Through Mr. Mayor, the normal process would be that staff are charged with negotiating any licences or leases, and that is the role of officers, and officers then bring that information back to the council for consideration. Can I just make the point about the full licence being attached to reports? That hasn't been the practice in the past. However, we can certainly do that going forward. But what we do in the report is cover the key elements or the key terms in terms of length, in terms of fees payable and usage. But it certainly hasn't been the custom or practice of the council to provide the full licence with council reports. Certainly can do that in the future, but we have not done that in the past.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I see part 4, the amendment as it stands?
Could we have that up on the screen, which is simply
strike out 2 and then add.
Strike out 2 and add the point of council. Yep.
Yeah, and I think D would be to attach.
No.
On the attached, that's part A. Okay, great. Okay, that's fine. Yep, I've got it.
We're not adding to a motion or an amendment.
I've got it.
That we're now having right of reply on.
Yeah, I haven't seen it, right? So this is the first time I've seen it, Mr. Mayor, and we do have to have it up on the screen before we vote on it. So I'm happy with that. So right of reply, yeah, look, that's fine. I would encourage council staff to go back and find it come to an agreement with Bridge Club. I'd implore councillors to stay out of those negotiations. And I would also ask that if it comes to the point where council cannot come to an agreement that the Bridge Club are happy with, then perhaps we need to, as a council, either meet in committee of the whole or have a briefing just to understand what the issues are, because I don't like getting a suggestion for a lease where the other party's not happy with. So anyway, I'll commit the motion or amendment.
Okay, that's right of reply. So I now put the amendment. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. That now becomes the motion. Is there any further debate in relation to the motion we now have before us? If not, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. So let's start with item 4.1, and we have no further speakers for the remainder of the business paper. 4.11, we now have no further speakers for the remainder of the business paper. Is that right? Yes. So we need to go back to the start of the meeting, which is 4.1.
Can I just move Can I move an alternative motion to that, please?
To 4.1?
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
I just think that with everything that's going on, I just don't really think it's 3 months before the election. I don't think it's necessary really for councillors to go on another junket right before the end of council term. I'm sure that money could be better spent, put back into the community. So I will move a motion that we don't send anybody to the conference unless they wish to pay for it themselves.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Miles? Do you wish to speak further to your motion, Councillor Collins?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory, Mr. Mayor. So,
any debate? For? Yes, Councillor McLaughlin, you were speaking for or against?
Look, I'm happy with that. I was quite keen to attend that meeting, but I was always going to attend under my own steam. So I'm totally happy with that arrangement.
A question to the General Manager. Are we able to have delegates with a motion like that, even though they're paying for themselves? Do we need to move that we have delegates, because it is a voting process? To you, General Manager.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'll take that on notice and come back to you.
Oh, okay. So at the moment we have a motion to, if councillors wish to go, they go at their own cost. But we need to have a further report, I would have thought, as to voting delegates if they attend. Is that right?
I think, through Mr. Mayor, I think if the council is representing council, but whoever pays is irrelevant. So if there is a councillor who wishes to attend, they could be voting delegate, but I'll need to take on notice and just choose the voting delegate.
Okay, so that'll be a further report. Yes. Okay, the motion before us is, we have that, please. So it's not in the business paper. Just get that up on the screen. Now, the alternate motion, second, which is now the motion, is that we don't send anyone to the conference unless they pay for it themselves. Is that cover it, Councillor Collins?
It's beautifully worded. Thank you. That's exactly how it should be.
And do we need to include the further report be brought back in relation to that?
I might suggest that it's probably not necessary. You know, if it's required that we need to endorse someone to be a voting delegate, then sure, it can come back. But if it can be dealt with.
Well, what we do, you can't represent the council without being delegated by the council to do that. Just attending doesn't give you the voting powers.
Right. Well, Councillor McLaughlin, would you like to go on your own? Would you like to? Because I'm quite happy to incorporate that if you would like to attend.
I'm happy to attend. If the mayor is also attending, or the deputy mayor, then I think that's more appropriate that they be the official voting delegate. There's only one required, as far as I understand it. So.
Yes, I intend to attend.
Yes. So I think it's appropriate that the mayor or the deputy mayor, if one of them are attending, and there's one voting delegate, that it be the mayor representing the council.
Sure. Well, perhaps if we just said that the mayor be appointed delegate if he wishes to pay for himself, otherwise the deputy mayor, otherwise Councillor McLaughlin, if those two don't decide to attend, if that works. That way we can just get this, you know, save all the staff report. This just gets it done.
I'm just getting that down so that we know what we're voting on or discussing.
Yep, that's great. I think the intention's clear, and that does it. Yep.
Councillor Miles, are you happy with that motion as it now stands? Being the seconder. Can't see the screen. Are you happy, Councillor Miles?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Krassoi.
Apologies, Mr. Mayor. I'm assuming that if I didn't say anything because I was always planning to go at my own expense, I don't need council approval to do that, do I? I can just attend as a councillor at my own expense. But yep, thank you.
Yep.
That's all.
Yep. It's the voting delegate that needs to have approval from council to fill that role. Everybody else is welcome to go, as you say, at your own expense. Any further discussion? Right of reply, Councillor Collins.
No, I don't think that's necessary.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. That brings us to item 4.2, Riverglade Plan of Management. Councillor Miles.
Move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Collins. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Miles?
I will briefly, Mr. Mayor. There was some correspondence that came through today, and obviously after a lengthy process, the council and the consultants were involved in. It's good to get this report here. I would just say some councillors attended a meeting last week at Warrinda Place to discuss specifically the hard stand car park proposed for the end of that street there. Although this plan endorses the general view that there should be a car park in that area, I did want to raise that the residents' concerns there really do need to be fleshed out. I would have thought that that is a space that would be low-hanging fruit for a residential parking scheme. There were also a number of different sort of complementary issues that were raised that perhaps council can address. One of them being whether it was a shared access way for pedestrians and cyclists up onto the Gladesville Bridge. I know that there was problems with the speed signage and the definition of where people were allowed to park, because at the moment they're just parking wherever. I would also suggest that were we to progress the construction of a formal car park, that would have to be done in consultation with those residents, and plans would have to be brought to council for that to occur. It would be my strong preference that if there was a car park built there, that it would be a timed car park with a boom gate that closed after a certain time and opened in the morning. And again, probably complemented with something like a residential parking scheme for the residents of the estate. So with that in mind, I'm happy to endorse the plan that's before us, but conscious that there are issues around that car park that as proposed, and that I guess any further proposal to establish a car park there needs to come back to council, and the residents that are there need to have their opportunity to have all of those issues addressed and really flesh out any negative impact that it may have.
Okay. Any further speakers again? Well, is there a speaker against the motion? Speakers for the motion? Councillor Sanderson, I think you were first, then followed by Councillor McLaughlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Look, I endorse what Councillor Miles has said. I don't know that all those solutions are possible, but I'm sure it's something we'll look at the future, and there'll be many possible solutions. We are, however, talking about a plan of management, and there has been a huge amount of work gone into this. At this point in time, if Councillor Miles will bear with me, I'll make a couple of observations about a couple of errors I've picked up at this late stage, but it'd be nice if they could be corrected before the document goes out. If I could refer councillors to pages 102 and 103 of our business paper, which are pages 46 and 47 of the draft plan of management. You'll see that the heading permitted purposes is repeated twice, and it brings about a bit of confusion about the way those items are prioritised. So that, I believe that should be corrected. So if we can make a note to have that corrected as part of the motion.
What page was that? Sorry.
It's page
103.
Yeah, turn to 102 and 103 of the business paper.
Thank you.
And there's a series of dot points. The confusing thing is it goes from permitted purposes, one heading, then exemplary activities or uses, then it goes back to permitted purposes again. I think that needs to be clarified.
Are there any other issues?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, there is one other, and this was a matter that was discussed at the final meeting of the CAG. That one appears on page 109 of the business paper, or 53 of the plan of management, and there's a reference to electric barbecues. My understanding from the final meeting that the CAG held was that what we were planning to do was to refer to picnic area facilities rather than electric barbecues or barbecues. So I think two other members of the CAG are councillors as well. I wonder whether they can confirm whether my recollection is correct or not.
Because we're changing the report or making modification, I think we need to do that as an amendment to the motion, so it's full. Yes, so those issues would be. Are you moving an amendment?
Yes, I move an amendment.
It could, if it assists, Mr. Mayor, perhaps it'd be worth just going through them to see if they are minor changes, I'm happy to accept them.
Yes. So is there a seconder to the amendment? If not, I'll second it. The Mayor second that for the record. So what are those issues again, please, Councillor Sanderson? That
again,
amendment?
Well, it's probably better for me to refer to the pages of the plan of management rather than the paper.
Yes.
In the plan of management at pages 46 and 47, the heading permitted purposes appears twice.
Just 1 second. Just getting this down.
Can I make a suggestion, Mr. Mayor? If it's formatting, we can meet with Councillor Sanderson. If it's substantive, we can deal with it as part of the amendment to the recommendation of the report.
I think the first one is formatting. I think the second one may be substantive. So that's okay. There's only a couple. Let's just get.
There's only two.
Yeah, let's just get them in the system and dealt with. And the second issue?
Well, the first point is I think what needs to happen is that one of those headings needs to be deleted and the items moved across under the single heading.
Well, I don't think we need to do this on the run, but
no.
I think the fact that that needs to be corrected has been highlighted, and then there's a formatting thing which the General Manager will attend to now. It's highlighted. Sure. The other one I understood was more substantive.
Yes, well, that relates to the interpretation of what the CAG meeting was and whether Council agrees with it. But my understanding of the interpretation of the CAG meeting was that the on page 53 of the plan of management, under the subheading picnic areas, as the draft refers to access potential for electric barbecue, that I believe brought some concern from.
Yeah, but what's the wording you're working on?
So I mean, I think the wording should be replaced. Picnic area facilities.
Perhaps, Mr. Mayor, can we get clarification from the staff on that? What the intent was?
Yes, I think the author is online. Through you, General Manager.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor to the Parks Planner. Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, councillors. Yes, there was discussion at CAG about taking out any reference to the barbecues, but keeping it there as just one of the park facilities. But because the action isn't installing the electric barbecues, it is to assess whether there's any potential for electric barbecues. I left it in the plan, but I'm happy to take that out if that is preferred.
Yep. Well, we have an amendment before us, which, do you accept that amendment to the, it's an addition to the original motion?
Sorry, could I just have that on the screen? Could I just, so the first one is formatting, the second one is just the removal of the term barbecue?
Electric, I thought it was. Councillor Sanderson, are you referring to electric or the barbecue?
No, I think the idea at the CAG was that the term electric barbecue be replaced with picnic area facilities.
I'm happy with that, Mr. Mayor. It's not a big one in the context of what we're talking about here.
Yeah, no, it just gives direction. So the second, is that you, Councillor Collins?
I'd like to ask a question.
You may.
Would an electric barbecue be considered a picnic area facility?
It could be, yes.
So,
but it's not specific.
Can I understand what is the point of I just don't understand what the point. Do we not want electric barbecues? This is just saying assess potential for electric barbecues, but it seems that Councillor Sanderson is intent on removing reference to a barbecue. For the life of me, I just can't understand why. Why would we take something and make it a word to make it broader when what is the intention, I ask, of Councillor Sanderson of removing barbecue and calling it a picnic facility?
I note your hands up, Councillor Cressoy, but Councillor Sanderson, could you answer that if you may?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, it's simply the desire of the CAG, and I think as we went to the trouble to have a community group advisors, so I would like to follow their advice. I think the term electric barbecue did raise some sensitivities with some people. That's a way of just broadening it so that we do have scope if we're determined to do that in the future, but we're not, unnecessarily concerning people, but that's our intention.
Mr. Mayor, I will provide some clarification if you like.
Sure.
I was on the CAG.
And then we'll go through the General Manager to Mr. Strickland, but over to you, Councillor Cressoy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was on the CAG and we raised it purely because when we read through the plan of management multiple times and all of the submissions from members of the community, electric barbecue was raised in several submissions from people being concerned about them being messy, dirty, dangerous, attracting dogs, an onerous item to have in the park. The CAG actually didn't agree with those comments, though there were quite a few of them. And so the advice of the CAG was, seeing as we're not actually definitely putting them in anyway, why not take that language out, because it's obviously upset some people. And by saying picnic facilities, if down the track we want to put electric barbecues in, they can be covered by it. And so it was purely language management just to make the people who'd kind of found the electric barbecue word alarming, obviously from some bygone era when electric barbecues were, I don't know, but that was the only reason the CAG recommended it. And at the time, the council officer had said that they would make the change, and now it's in there again. Like, it's here nor there, but that's the clarification around the language.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Through you, Madam General Manager, Mr. Strickland wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, ask the Director to make a comment on the parking reference before.
I need to unmute.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just during the debate there was a reference to the parking issue and in particular resident parking. So just a couple of issues there. The first one is that Crown land being a reserve, the council needs to be a little bit careful about alienating parts of that reserve to a particular class or group of residents for something that's not a recreational pursuit. And the other thing, just in relation to resident parking, typically we think of resident parking in public streets and subject to the permit parking requirements of RMS. And if there's any intention to introduce resident parking in Waruda, and I don't know if that was the reference, but any resident with more than 2 parking spaces on their property wouldn't be permitted to have any parking permits anyway. So there's just that difficulty as well.
Okay, can we take stock of where we're up to at the moment? We have a motion for adoption of the report from Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Collins, if I'm correct. We then have an amendment being moved by Councillor Sanderson, and that was seconded by myself, I understood, for the purposes of getting it discussed. And Councillor Sanderson's amendment is to add to the motion, not overwrite the motion. So this is an additional point to the motion that the amendment is referring to. Have I got that correct? I believe so. Is that?
No, you haven't, Mr. Mayor. I've agreed to incorporate that into the motion, so it's not an amendment. It's just it becomes the motion.
Well, does the seconder agree to that? who was Councillor Collins. Do you
Yeah,
agree?
as long as, look, to get it done, as long as everybody is clear here that that picnic area facilities includes barbecues, and this is just a matter of Councillor Sanderson trying to, I don't know, hoodwink the community or
no, Councillor Collins.
What's the problem?
Please respect your colleagues on council. That's your opinion.
Well, I don't understand why it's being done.
Look, I just asked you a question. Do you accept the amendment or not? Do you accept the amendment or not?
If I will accept it, I will answer the question, Mr. Mayor.
No, I asked you, do you accept the amendment or not?
On the understanding that a electric barbecue is a picnic area facility, I accept the amendment.
Yes, okay. So that now becomes the motion. Do you wish to speak further? Does anybody wish to speak further to the motion? No. Does the mover wish right of reply? No, I guess. Councillor Miles?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. I now put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. We now move on to item 4.3, which is community grants. And I understand the General Manager would like to make a comment before we deal with this motion.
Councillors, I sent an email late this afternoon. You may not have had the opportunity to read it. In that email, based on some of the questions that were being asked by councillors this afternoon, I would suggest that the matter be deferred until we have a briefing to take you through the recommended applicants.
Moved by Councillor Miles, seconded by Councillor Crassoy, that we defer the matter to the next meeting. All those in favour?
May I just briefly speak on
that? Councillor Miles, do you wish to speak to your motion? No. Speakers for or against?
Just a question, should it be withdrawn or deferred? Because I don't think we need to get the same report back. Can it be withdrawn? Is that the right? I would have thought that this motion be withdrawn rather than deferred.
Madam General Manager, what's your advice?
I might actually defer to the Director of Finance and Corporate Strategy. Just before I do, Councillor Collins, are you suggesting that the report may need to come back in different form?
Yeah, absolutely. I've big concerns about it. So I think it needs to go back and be redone. So
on that basis, the Director of Finance and Corporate Strategy, could you advise whether it should be deferred or withdrawn?
My suggestion is not to just leave the word withdrawn, because that implies that the community program itself won't come back. So perhaps just a reflection on how we word, if we do say withdrawn, that's then the decision that you're withdrawing the entire contents of the report itself. Perhaps a deferral with there might be some content that you specifically would like in the deferred matter.
Deferred for further consideration probably covers it. Is that okay?
But wouldn't that mean that the same motion has to come back before council?
No, it means that it goes back for further consideration. And if there's an additional or a different outcome, then that'll come back to council.
That's fine, as long as it's not the same report.
Okay, so who moved that? Councillor Miles, are you happy with that little addition to it? Yep. And the seconder, Councillor Crassoy, is happy, so that becomes the motion. Any further discussion? I think we'll keep the discussion to the next time it comes forward. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. That now allows us to move on to, we're done with 4.4, so we've got to go to 4.5, which is in the business paper on page 194. Councillor Collins? I can't hear you, Councillor Collins. You had your hand up.
Move the recommendation.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Crassoy. Is there any discussion? Oh, sorry. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Collins?
No, that's, yeah.
Any debate against? Councillor Sanderson?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I have some concern about the report. At no point does it mention anything about the distances from the intersection of the proposed sign. So in some respects, I'd rather see the matter deferred and more information provided before we consider it.
Is that a foreshadowed motion?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a foreshadowed motion.
Sorry.
Motion to the motion. Councillor Collins.
Sorry, isn't it 20 metres? I'm looking at a diagram here on the opposing page.
Can I ask through the General Manager to Mr. Strickland, does this diagram refer to a multi-laned road, and is there another one for a single lane road?
Bring you to the Director. Neil, just need to unmute.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I actually can't answer that off the top of my head. We'll come back with some further advice to Council. I know the RMS guidelines do have, in some cases, examples for single lane roads and others for 2-lane roads, multiple lane roads. I'm just not sure about this particular one.
Right. I think that's an important piece of information. We've got a motion from Councillor Collins, seconded by Councillor Crassoy, and Councillor Sanderson's. What was your motion? Sorry. Position.
I foreshadowed that we defer the matter to get more information in the report.
Okay. Right. So, do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Collins?
Well, I will, considering there's a just briefly. This has been the recommendation of RMS transport, or whatever they're called now, the police, and so yeah, there's no reason why they've all agreed that nothing should be done and there should be no change. So I think that bringing this back is really a waste of time, because it will end up having to go back to the traffic committee anyway, and they've already said that they don't support it. So we're just going around in circles. So,
well, a point of correction there: the traffic committee failed to make a decision, so the status quo was to maintain. So the committee hasn't made a decision in relation to the matter.
Mr. Mayor, we were both in that meeting, and the understanding was that nothing needed to be done. That was the discussion.
Well, okay, we'll have
to send it around in circles, whatever. But it's just silly.
When I was when I was chairing the meeting, I asked for a seconder. There was no seconder, so the matter was not dealt with. And by default, the status quo is maintained. So there was no opinion passed by the committee.
Well, it's implied, because the status quo is this report. So anyway, whatever. Status quo should remain. That's what the committee intended, and that's how it's going to. Yeah,
No. It's the outcome.
It's semantics. Just
anyway.
Just continue.
Well, so we've now got the opportunity for councillors to speak for or against the motion, and we have a foreshadowed motion. Are there any speakers against the motion? Speakers for the motion? I'll put the motion based on, we'll write a reply first, Councillor Collins. No?
Necessary.
Put the motion on the basis that there is a foreshadowed motion if this is lost. All those in favour? Against? Declare it lost, the foreshadowed motion. Councillor Sanderson, do you wish to move that formally?
Mr. Mayor, I'll move the foreshadowed motion.
And that's recorded, is it? Yes, that's recorded. Is there a seconder? Councillor Crassoy. Is there any further debate? Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Sanderson?
No, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe it's necessary.
Councillor Collins, you wish to speak against the motion?
Yeah, this is a complete waste of time. Nobody wants this change. The school don't want it. RMS don't want it. Police don't want it. It's gonna, if it ends up coming through to this, back to this council, it will go back to the local traffic committee. They won't support it because it's not safe, and it's a complete waste of staff time. I'd like a report into the time spent on going around in circles again too when this is over. But what a waste of time and resources.
Well, that's your opinion, Councillor Collins. I hold a different opinion.
We'll see. Thank
Well,
you.
there you go. Is there any further discussion, Councillor Crasoy?
Oh, just Mr. Mayor, and with my apologies, because I did second Councillor Collins, but it's actually something that you said that I'm concerned about and that the council officer has said they'll come back to us on. And that's the only reason I would defer it is that your comment, because in the report that we're given, we're actually shown an example. I hadn't picked it up. I actually thought it was a thing of Mary Street and wondered why there was a second crossing actually. And so it does concern me a little that this is based on a multi-lane road when there are residents heckling us regularly about the lack of parking in Mary Street, and there are other schools with shorter lines of sight that are considered safe by the state. And so I do apologise, Councillor Collins. I seconded your motion, but I think the Mayor's raised a good point, and I'd like to hear back from the council officer on whether this is correct or not.
I think the General Manager, do you wish to make a comment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, can I ask the Director, Service Delivery, to make a comment on the item and the reasoning at the Traffic Committee, and if you can add some clarity around the signage. Just need to unmute.
You need to unmute, Mr. Strickland.
Still...
We can't hear you.
Yeah.
Sorry, I note the RMS diagram doesn't make any reference to it being either a single lane road or dual lane. Clearly in Mary Street, we don't have marked lanes there. My gut feel is that this is just a generic...
Mr. Strickland, we're not here for your gut feel. We'd like the facts, please.
All right, so, well, that sort of takes the wind out of my sails a bit because, as I said, I'm not familiar with this particular case. So if the council doesn't want me to speculate, then I'd suggest the best thing is to for staff to investigate that, and we'll come back with a further report.
Yes, thank you.
Point of order.
What's the
Mr.
point
Mayor,
of order?
your behaviour there is just completely inappropriate. The staff member is trying to answer a question, and that was bullying and completely inappropriate. So I would ask that you use a little bit of, treat people with a little bit of respect. I don't mind if you fire up at me, but you shouldn't treat staff like that. Thank you.
Well, my position is clear that staff will provide factual information, not opinion. And I think that is a reasonable position to take, and I think the staff would accept that.
There are ways to deal with
Councillor Collins. So we're now at a position where we have a motion before us. Are there any further speakers? If not, right of reply.
Not necessary, Mr. Mayor.
Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried. We now move on to item 4.8, which is Sydney North District Planning Panel. Councillor Sanderson.
I move the motion, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Crasoy, wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Sanderson?
I don't believe it's necessary, Mr. Mayor.
Any further debate? Right of reply. Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. We now move on to item 4.9, which is membership of the Gladesville Main Street and Huntersville Main Street Committee. Councillor Prassel, you wish to move the recommendation? Yes. Is there a seconder? Councillor McLaughlin. Do you wish to speak to your motion, Councillor Prassel?
Just briefly, Mr. Mayor, to say that no, I won't.
Okay, I'll no further debate. Councillor Sanderson. Oh, Councillor Miles. For or against, Councillor Sanderson?
Just to point something out in the report, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
That is that the report deals with the Huntersville Main Street Committee. It appears to have nominations, but there's no recommendation as to the composition of that committee.
There is, Councillor Sanderson, under the table, there's dot 3.
Okay, well the motion doesn't refer to it, or the recommendation doesn't refer to that.
Does the General Manager wish to comment?
Through Mr. Mayor, I didn't quite understand Councillor Sanderson's question. Could you please repeat that again?
Councillor Sanderson?
If you look at point 2 of the recommendation, it refers to the Gladesville Main Street Committee, but it makes no reference to the Huntersville Main Street Committee, which it appears we're appointing committee members to.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor. If you go underneath the table, Councillor Sanderson,
Okay,
see
thank
point
you.
3.
Yeah, thank you.
Refers to Huntersville Village Committee.
Good, thank you. I stand corrected.
Okay, we have a mover and Councillor Miles wishes to speak for or against.
I'll speak for, but I just, it's kind of disappointing, I guess. I served on the Huntersville Main Street Committee when it was first formed, and it was quite a good committee to flesh out some of the issues that we were having at the time with the repaving works and trying to rejuvenate some of the shopping district down there, particularly as the Huntersville Hotel development sort of came to its end. Yeah, it's a bit disappointing. It was always a difficult committee to get a lot of people enthused about. Obviously, we're going to wind it up here, but I think that perhaps given what potential there is, perhaps early next term to sort of re-involve people in the Huntersville Main Street, that we, particularly with the community infrastructure strategy, I think that it's probably something that I don't want to drop permanently. It's something that might be wound up for the remainder of this term, but it was a worthwhile committee when it started in 2012, and I think that it would be a shame to just sort of let it go.
Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. We do. Is there any further debate? Councillor Prassel.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just in right of reply, I agree with Councillor Miles. As a resident, I was on that committee since early 2000s, I think, and long before I became a councillor. And its value as in advocacy to council, but also as a conduit to the community, is still high. But you are correct. After multiple years of trying to get businesses to participate, we just don't have the bodies on that committee. But that's not to say that there isn't a strong voice in that precinct, and the long anticipated precinct communication and partnerships are still very much bubbling in the ether. So I will hope that there is some other format that the voices of that village will always be heard in. Likewise, in Gladesville, I'm really hoping that Gladesville Main Street Committee terms of reference for the next term of council, but even in the lead up to that, will involve a much stronger voice into the master planning that's going on in the Gladesville area, and partnership with Ryde Council is critical to that. So they're still very valuable committees. Oh, well, it's still a valuable committee, and the village won't be forgotten by any stretch.
Okay, that was right of reply, so that concludes the debate. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare it carried unanimously. We now, I guess, have the option, although we've still got plenty of time, that we may wish to adopt some of these more procedural matters as a group. Is there an appetite for that from the council? Yes. Well, let me just move through them quickly and see if there are any issues that people wish to address. We've done, we're up to item 10. Is there any concerns there?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, we need to do item 10. Item 12. That's okay. Item 13. Okay, item 14. 15. 16. Councillor Collins wants 16. 17.
15 it was.
Oh, it's 15, okay.
Yep.
Not 16. Yep, 17. 18. 19.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we could have a motion to adopt the recommendations in 4.12, 4.3, 4.14, 4.16, 17 and 18. Is that moved? Councillor McLaughlin, is there a seconder? Councillor Collins, do you wish to speak to that? No. Debate? No. Put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Declare that carried unanimously. So that brings us to, we needed to talk about item 4.10. Councillor Sanderson, you wish to move a motion?
I'll move the motion just with one slight difference at point 4. The council nominate Mr. Bob Moore as a representative of the Institute of Architects on the Conservation Advisory Panel.
Is there a seconder to that? I'll second that. Is there, do you wish to speak to that motion, Councillor Sanderson?
Mr. Mayor, I'm a little bit cautious in that if we are to move into the maze that have been put forward, Mr. Bob Moore is just an outstanding candidate to be a member of our Conservation Advisory Panel. I'll leave it at that.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Miles?
All right, through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess a question of Councillor Sanderson. What's the, it's fairly unusual, that you're putting forward Mr. Moore, and in the motion, the original motion, he is the alternate, and then Mr. Lonergan, you don't want to name as an alternate. What's the thinking there?
I think if we're going to start talking about candidates, then we need to go into the committee of the whole, I think.
It's unusual, so I'd like to sort of flesh that out.
Committee of the whole.
Councillor Collins, Councillor McLaughlin. I'll put that. All those in favour? Against? Councillor Pressley? She's for. Okay. Unanimous. So we now terminate the broadcast for a brief moment while we discuss this matter in confidence as it relates to what's the term? Personal information.